Welcome. So I have produced this whole series of presentations and videos which are discussing workplace-based assessments and how you can collate them and how ultimately you can demonstrate your competence through their use and how they map to your curriculum. And I wanted to take the time to demonstrate how one patient encounter could map to multiple assessments and curriculum points. And when you start as a trainee ACCP, it's incredibly daunting trying to work out what or how to collect the assessments. And all of these presentations are ultimately designed to help alleviate some of that stress and support you to get the best start in your training possible. So this presentation is about the patient journey. And this will hopefully show you how you can generate workplace-based assessments from one patient review. And I have signposted 11 potential assessment opportunities from one single patient review. So just a very quick disclaimer. So this work is underpinned by the National ACCP Induction Project. We surveyed 106 qualified and trained ACCPs nationally, and we found that only 25% of those respondents were provided with a formal overview of how to use their logbooks and what information was vital for FICM and the ARCP process. So the purpose of all of these presentations is to help you demystify the paperwork process, and ultimately knowledge is power, and once you know how to get paperwork savvy, you can focus on building a portfolio that really demonstrates your progression and competence and will ultimately help you get the most from your training. So this is the patient's journey, and I'm going to talk you through one patient's journey from the point of referral in the emergency department to their review, to their stabilisation and transfer to CT, to their ultimate admission to ITU, and then closing with a family update. So you are carrying the referral bleep today, you lucky thing, and that plastic box starts making a lot of noise at you, and that is the ED reg calling to make a referral, and they have asked you to come and review a 55-year-old male who has presented with a sudden onset headache and vomiting, who was found collapsed at home with a low GCS. His pupils are fixed and dilated, and they have very reasonably asked for an ITU review for potential airway support and transfer to CT. So you arrive in the emergency department with the ITU registrar who you are working with today, and you make an initial assessment of the patient and you begin to plan. You discuss with the ITU registrar that you think the patient will likely need to be intubated, and you discuss this proposed plan and repair the equipment, and you decide with the registrar which drugs you're going to use, the potential complications or concerns for this process. You also discuss through the use of the airway checklist, and you move towards a point where you successfully intubate the patient and they are stable. So we're going to take a pause moment here and just go over what the potential assessment opportunities are up until this point. So the first assessment opportunity that you could potentially get is a mini CACS, and this is for the assessment and stabilisation for intubation. So you have assessed the patient, you've made a plan, and you have successfully intubated them with the support of the ITU registrar and ED team. The other area that you could consider an assessment for would be a case-based discussion later on, so for the safe intubation of a patient with altered neurology, and you could discuss neuroprotective strategies and drug selection for intubation. So there are a couple of options here for case-based discussions. And important, and then the final one would be a DOPS for the actual intubation itself, because you have successfully intubated the patient and you have undertaken that skill with the support of the intensive care registrar. So you've stabilised the patient and you need to prepare them to go to the CT scanner, and the registrar says something which they often do, is that we should neuroprotect the patient. Whilst they're saying that, they're already elbow deep in making all the adjustments to neuroprotect them, and they are adjusting the ventilator, they're altering sedation, and you ask the registrar, what do you mean by neuroprotection? Whilst they're having a think about that, you continue to prepare the patient for safe transfer to CT, and you use a checklist to ensure that you have all the kit available for transfer, and with the support of the ITU registrar and your ED team, you safely move the patient from the emergency department to the CT scanner. So this is your next pause moment. So what are your assessment opportunities here? So there are quite a few here actually. So you could collect a case-based discussion on neuroprotective strategies, and you could discuss what neuroprotection is and what the core management strategies are for that patient. You could also collect a mini CACs, so for the safe preparation and transfer of the patient to CT, because you have prepared the patient and you've performed the transfer under supervision to the CT scanner safely. So they're sort of a couple of options that you have at this point in terms of assessment opportunities. So you arrive up on the critical care unit, and you admit them to the unit, and the patient needs to be admitted, but they are also going to need a few procedures. So they're going to need a central line for vasopressors and an arterial line for monitoring, and under supervision you insert the arterial line followed by a central line. So you're having an incredibly busy day at this point. I'm not quite sure where all your other colleagues are, but you know, it is COVID time, so everyone's pretty busy. You go ahead and you request the imaging, and you also request their routine admission screens and bloods, and you decide to complete the admission with the support of the critical care team. So again, we're going to take a pause moment. So what are your assessment opportunities here? So the first assessment opportunity is that you could collect a DOPS for the central line, and you could consider a formative assessment for this line, or if you were perhaps further down the line in your training and you were able to get a consultant to the bed space, this could be an opportunity to get your summative assessment for that central line. The other thing that you could collect a DOPS for would be your arterial line, and the same again, you could consider this for a formative assessment, or if there is a consultant present at the bed space and they are happy to supervise you, you could actually undertake your summative assessment if that's the right time for you to undertake it. The other things that you could collect here would be perhaps a mini CACs for the admission of the patient to ITU. So this is an assessment of your ability to admit an intubated patient to the intensive care. So these are just a few assessment ideas, and there are multiple here. You know, I've only signposted 11 through this presentation, but already sat here I'm thinking to myself, I could have signposted so many more. So now the next kind of after you've stabilised the patient, this is one of the most important areas, and this is for you to update the patient's family or next of kin. And the patient's wife and daughter have arrived, and you take the time to sit down with the registrar and you discuss the best way to approach breaking bad news. You discuss the significant findings on his CT scan, which has sadly shown that he has a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which is catastrophic and not appropriate for surgical intervention. You decide that with the support of the registrar that you feel confident that you can lead the family update, and you do this fairly well. You answer all the family's questions. It's a very amicable discussion, and after the discussion with the family, you take the time to debrief with the registrar and the bedside nurse on the update itself. So again, this is a pause moment. So what are your assessment opportunities here? So your assessment opportunities are that you could undertake a case-based discussion for approaches to breaking bad news. So you discuss techniques and approaches on how best to break bad news in the critical care environment. You could also consider a mini CACs for the family update itself. So following the update and debrief with the MDT, you can generate paperwork to help you develop further. And ultimately, you can reflect. So you can reflect completely on this admission from start to finish and map this to multiple areas of your curriculum. And that is really important. Reflection is really important, and it is a part of your assessment process as a trainee ACCP. So I have signposted 11 potential assessment opportunities from one referral. So from the moment of referral to the moment of review, to stabilisation and transfer, to ultimate admission to critical care, and then their subsequent family update. Now, I have only signposted 11, but I can guarantee there will be multiple people watching this and thinking, well, you could get a case-based discussion for this or for that, or a mini CACs for this and that. And that just goes to show how one patient, there are so many opportunities. When you're managing their care, you just need to recognise when there is an opportunity and discuss that with the relevant people at the time. So I want to thank you for taking the time to take that journey with me and that patient. If you have any questions about any of my content, so you can contact me via Twitter, or you can contact me via my email address, and I will endeavour to come back to you. And thank you very much for taking the time.